What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here with Darryl Slater for the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap podcast. It's a nearly season ending edition of the Talk is Cheap. There's a lot going on with the Giants. The playoffs will not be there. 4-12. They're about to be 4-13. I think this is probably the worst team in the NFL as we sit here right now. They've lost 5 games in a row by double digits. Joe Judge has been mocked and criticized by just about every major personality in the NFL over the last week for his insane 11-minute rant on Sunday, which has Darryl and I worried that there's at least a possibility we have to cover a coaching search, which I don't think either of us want to do. But so, Darryl, how have you processed the end of the season and how, I mean, like you and I are pretty pessimistic, you even more than me. And I don't think we could have predicted it ending in this way.
Really? I'm pessimistic.
Now, you're a teddy bear.
Well, thank you. Look, I mean, 4-7 coming out of the Eagle game. Daniel Jones hurts his neck in that game by not sliding. And we thought, I think we talked about it after the game, or after the injury came out. If this turns out to be something that keeps him out for the season, as it has, they could lose out. But I don't think either of us envisioned them really going into the tank, not tanking obviously, but being as terrible as they have been. Getting blown out every game. We know Mike Glennon was going to be a problem. I think he's probably been a bigger problem than anyone could have expected. They're going to lose again Sunday with Jake Fromm starting because Mike Glennon's hurt. But I don't think we saw them being as non-competitive
Yeah, that's the
as they
main
have
thing.
been.
Yeah.
And I think, look, if there had been even a peep or two of locker room discord coming out of this facility, I think that, we could look at this and say Joe Judge is a goner. Now, I suppose it could happen. I don't think it will,
Yeah,
but
me neither.
I just don't think John Mara has the stomach to go 2-done with another head coach and to be paying 3 coaches
Yeah.
next year because it's the final year of Pat Shermer's buyout. Remember, Ben McAdoo had a 4-year contract. 16, 17, 18, and 19. So he was only paid for 2 years of not working. And so at no point here in this stretch has John Mara ever paid 3 coaches, 2 non-employed and 1 employed. That's what he would be doing if he fired Joe Judge. That's one of the reasons, and I don't think it's the only reason. Well, I don't think it's the main reason, but I think it's one of the reasons why they keep him. I think, look, I think John Mara still believes in this guy, even though a lot of people don't, and even though I think you and I fall on certainly the more skeptical side at this point.
Yeah, and real quickly, just to touch on your point about how we didn't think it could get any worse, they had -10 net passing yards the other day. Who they just play? I'm blanking on the
The
Bears.
Bears, bad
But there was
team.
a stat correction, so it got moved to -6 instead. So they gained yards, and they still weren't at 0.
That's
Just to give you an
remarkable.
idea of like the historic level of ineptitude. You can say that the injuries are, they had an incompetent quarterback, but they chose Mike Glennon as their backup quarterback because they thought he was good, and
I
he
mean, they
was.
lost to the Bears,
Yeah, the
a
Bears
bad
are a bad
team
NFL team.
that is
So
going to be firing their coach, and everybody knows it. They
yeah,
lost 29-3. They lost the game by 26 points
and
after
as
losing.
as many have like phrased it, how can you look at that game? There was one coach that is guaranteed to get fired, and there's another that is guaranteed to come back practically, and the one that got killed was the one that's guaranteed to come back.
I
So
mean, it's remarkable. I mean, and so they lose by 26, 24, 15, 16, and 11, if my math is right in this stretch since beating the Eagles by a whopping score of 13-7 in that game. Oh, and by the way, they lost by 20 points in the game before that to the Bucks. Obviously, a really good Bucks team. But yes, very little has gone right for this team coming out of the bye. Really the last time you could feel totally good about things, November 7th, they beat the Raiders. Oh, by the way, it's January 7th, and we're recording this 2 months ago. So, yeah, man, I just again, I just think there's so much to wonder about Joe Judge in terms of his competence, and I'm really skeptical about this guy at this point. Yes, he didn't have his quarterback for these last 6 games, but again, he was 4-7. It's not like he was 7-4
yeah,
and he lost
they
his
weren't
quarterback.
they weren't good with Daniel Jones. Their offense was scoring 17 points a game.
I mean, this has been the problem for the failed NFL teams around here for quite a while, and it's this: they haven't been able to, number one, develop a quarterback. That's been the problem for the Jets for a while here. Even with
Yeah,
Rex Ryan, he could never bring in the right offensive mind to get the job done consistently. And of course Eli Manning didn't need developing, but he was fading, and they held on to him for too long, and they just have not been able to find any developmental stability with Daniel Jones. So the offensive problems, these two teams, if you look at how bad they've been bad overall, the Jets and Giants. But like offensively, they've been among the worst teams in the league, and you can't win at all in today's NFL being as bad as these teams have been offensively.
That's actually a good way to segue into what I wanted to mention next, because the discussion about I can see the argument for Joe getting a third year. Like I can, like you want to. This roster was a mess. Whatever. I mean, you can make all the excuses you want. I mean, I think he's still at fault in a lot of ways. The offense was built in his image, whether Garrett was calling the plays he wanted or not. Um, and the offensive line, I would think that he at least had a hand in saying that he liked the guys that he had, so they didn't improve them. Whatever, but so you go in the next season, they have to revamp something on the offense. It's going to be the offensive line, but I would imagine they revamp that coaching staff on offense. Maybe Freddie Kitchens is back, maybe not as an offensive coordinator, but a position coach because Joe is fond of him, and maybe Jerry Skoplinski. But you could see the rest of them leaving. Rob Sale's probably going to leave for Florida. And historically, if you look at coaches that stay and then are forced to change their coaching staff, it almost never works. The most recent example I can think of was Doug Peterson when he went into the 2020 season. Jeffrey Lurie forced him to fire his offensive coordinator and his QB coach, somewhat understandably because the offense was kind of a mess with those two. Their wide receivers, no, the quarterback's coach wasn't fired. The wide receivers coach was fired. A bunch of other position coaches. He replaced them. He didn't have a offensive coordinator. He had a bunch of different coaches, and it was an absolute disaster last year. I mean, that wasn't the reason necessarily, but I don't think a coach that has to change his entire staff because of incompetence is very long for the job. And if you're forcing him to do that, then you're already admitting that you're going in the next season with him probably not, being the long-term solution, I would think, right?
I mean, Joe Judge has a big hill to climb to save his job with a new
Yeah.
GM and all this change next year. I mean, you usually don't see it where there's like you said, that one off season and all the sweeping changes that are basically forced upon a guy because there are so many problems. And then, oh, by the way, he comes back next year and is all saved. No, it usually ends with a steady decline into a firing. And you and I were talking about this the other day. Like, there's a possibility Joe Judge does not make it through the season next year. I mean,
Yeah.
realistically. So,
If they play
uh,
like this again, yeah.
yeah. I mean, look, they started 1-5, and then they were 3-7 this year. They were 1-5, and then 2-6, and then 3-7. So, uh, yeah. I mean, I think any of those type of starts could get him canned. Um, and what do they do offensive coordinator wise? Can they even get a really good coordinator to come and take this job for a hot seat head coach who embraced certainly the style of offense that Jason Garrett was running, a conservative approach, and he's been obviously fourth down going for it fourth down wise. He's been a conservative coach. What's the set of coordinators that is willing to come work for that type of coach who also happens to be on the hot seat? It would seem to be a limited group.
Yeah. I mean, and Joe's constantly talking about how he plays for field position, which is such a weird and goes against and I get it to an extent, but it's really an admission that you don't trust in your offense or your quarterback or whatever, I think.
Oh,
But
and but yeah, that I forgot that part of
yeah.
the allure, lack thereof, of the OC job. Daniel Jones, right?
Yeah.
So,
On the other hand, I think if you want to we're writing a bunch of stuff. This isn't one of them actually, but we're writing reasons for why the GM job would be good for the Giants or not. It's harder to come up with the good reasons, but with the offensive coordinator, as I said to you with the Dave Gettleman thing, whoever the next offensive coordinator is, it couldn't possibly be worse than it is right now. So at the very base minimum, he's improving on the previous offensive coordinator.
yeah, low bar
Um,
for the GM and low bar for the
and then
OC.
if he's the person that turns this offense around and the Giants are good next year because of this offensive coordinator, then he's going to be a head coach pretty quickly, I would think. So in that sense, it might if it's somebody who is a little more under the radar and a little farther away or something they're not going to get a big name, you would think, unless it's a Matt Nagy who's getting fired or Joe Brady was fired or whatever
Go
offensive
down that road again.
you you can always get a veteran guy or whatever. But like you said, it's just really not appealing. Especially Joe Judge has his hand in everything, and there's all this hype about their weapons. And Kenny Galladay played 12 games and might not even get to 500 yards receiving for the year, 0 touchdowns. Kadarius Toney's probably not playing this week. Evan Ingram's gone. Saquon, maybe he'll be better next year, but I don't know if you're banking on your running back anyway. Shepard's probably gone. Darius Slayton's kind of a minus at this point. So it's not like they have the weapons as they thought they did, and they don't have the offensive line. They're gonna have to get 4 new starting offensive linemen. So I mean, just saying it all out loud, it's like who in their right mind would take this job unless they either have a close relationship with Judge or they're trying to rehabilitate their image, like a Bill O'Brien type of guy. I don't, not necessarily him specifically, but like a guy like that that's been fired and not in the league or something like that.
Yeah, somebody who's out of work, like Jason Garrett was. I mean,
They should
so
interview Jason Garrett actually. Yeah,
but Joe Brady's an interesting one. I mean, obviously, if Matt Nagy is out and he's made some money, maybe he sits on the sideline and watches for a year. And by the way, you mentioned Galladay not getting to 500. Man, that's a bold. He's parked on 499 right now. So
he
you're
didn't
betting
even have
for
a catch last week, and he's Jake Fromm playing this week. So
there you go. It could be another goose egg game. By the way, he's had 2 goose egg games here
that's
this
crazy.
year.
I
He had
like
one
Kenny.
catch.
You and I think you and I both like him as like he's just like a good and honest dude.
Sure.
Um, but like that's it might wind up being the worst contract Dave Gettleman ever signed a guy to, and that's
They
including.
effectively are giving him $54 million over the course of 3 years because it's really going to be hard to cut him
Yeah. Well,
before
Nate
his third
Solder
year.
was even his first year. Nate Solder was average to below average. He's been terrible since, but at least you got 1 year out of Nate Solder. You're like, okay, he can play left tackle for us for now. Whereas Kenny Galladay, I'm like, this guy's injury prone. He can't get open on his own, and you have a quarterback who's going to get hurt again probably. So like, what can you rely on from Kenny? Like I was high on Kenny Galladay coming in. I think he had the talent, but it's clear he's a guy that's you need a quarterback that can get him the ball even when he's not open because he's not going to be open very often.
I'm looking at his numbers. I mean, he's played 13 games. He has 34 catches. So
He's going to play
he's
14. He's going to play 14 games, which is just 2 less than the original 16-game schedule, and he's not going to get to 600 yards or a touchdown
right
probably.
now. I mean, the guy is averaging less than 3 catches a game, and he's at 38 yards a game averaging. Like I mean, decent receivers can stumble into those type of
Yeah,
numbers. And I get it, the quarterback factor, but it's not like he was lighting it up when Daniel Jones was. Um,
exactly.
yeah, he had one good game. He had 116 yards in New Orleans, and other than that, he had a 64 and then a 64, a 53, and a 50. And that's you know one good game and a couple serviceable games, and they for $54 million when the Jets across town gave Corey Davis $27 million effectively. So, like, I don't see a world
Well,
in
and the thing was, it was even clear at the time that it was like so obvious that they overpaid Galladay because there like just wasn't a market for him. There was like a rumor that the Bears are interested, but they couldn't have paid him what the Giants did. So,
I
and,
remember.
and I get you have to overpay free agents, but like they did to like I was talking to like a cap expert from PFF, and he was like, even if they could have probably gotten him for, I'm not in the negotiation room, but like they're what paying him 18 mil a year. Even if you just drop that down to 16 mil, that 2 million is huge for this team right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's funny because
Still
it's
not a
like,
good deal at that point, but like at least like they saved a couple mil from their situation currently.
oh, absolutely, and we think about a year ago, or a little less than X, maybe it was February. We were doing a story on like, oh, wait, what skill position guys, what really good skill position guys would want to come play for Daniel Jones, and I think part of it was like, would Kenny Galladay actually want to come play for Jones? Like at this point, it's like, do do
Well,
does
let's
did
offer somebody 18 million, they'll play for anybody.
well, yeah, exactly. They could certainly you could flip it around. Like, does with the Giants quarterback, obviously gonna be Daniel Jones. We want Galladay at this point, considering what he's offered. And Tiki Barber in that story, we talked to him, and he said, they're going to pay $18 million a year for Kenny Galladay, and it's going to be a bad decision. They paid him exactly $18 million a year. So give credit to Tiki for being a little prophetic there, and he was right. It hasn't been worth it.
Yeah. Um, and so some news just came through that we can talk about this for a little bit here. Kadarius Toney was declared out on Sunday, which means his rookie season is over. 39 catches, 420 yards, 0 touchdowns from your first round pick. What are your reactions to Kadarius Toney?
Not good. I mean, not good. I mean, separate. I mean, so like separate some of the like foolishness from it, like the
Yeah,
punch. What he said about the
all the
the
Twitter stuff. Yeah,
the DUI or whoever. My
and
Henry
then
Ruggs.
there
My
was
God, that
then
seems
there
like
was
a
the last
lifetime
time they
ago.
played Washington when he complained about his role on social media.
Yeah. So like set aside all that because like let's be honest. I mean, Terrell Owens had a ton of drama in his career, tons,
Yeah,
tons, and he was a fantastic player. So you can you can separate that, but this is a guy who had Tony had 189 in one game, 78 in the other game, and didn't crack, and he had 40. He didn't crack over 40 in any of the other games. I mean, wound up missing what 7 games out of 17, and
And they basically didn't use him the first like 3 weeks, so he might as
What
well
a
have been
mess.
playing. Yeah,
What a mess. I mean,
yeah.
so they traded back to get him. They
So
pass him,
what was the plan when you drafted this guy? Like,
right?
that's what I don't get.
Uh, um, I think look, they pass on Micah Parsons, essentially pass on Rashawn Slater, two guys who look like they're going to be
By the way,
fantastic
I
players.
think Kadarius does have talent, by the way, but like he's a very raw player. Like that was always the thing with him.
Yeah, he's going to need time, and he didn't really get a lot of developmental opportunities this year because of injuries ever since really the very very start of training camp, and a sort of a lost rookie year. And so now he not only needs to play better, but they need to nail that other first round pick, or else
Yeah,
it'll look even worse that they traded back and passed on those two players who I mentioned in Parsons and Slater.
yeah. And the interesting thing is, like, you can make the argument that they should or could use both those first round picks on offensive linemen, which is like seems insane that they would draft one of the guys as a center that's highly rated, that they would have to draft a center in the top 10 because of how much Dave Gettleman failed to build the offensive line and is just in shambles right now.
Yeah, they have needs all across. They got to get
Yeah.
right
They
tackle. They got
need
to
more
get both
pass
guards.
rushers. Yeah.
Yeah, they have so many issues. So many issues.
An underrated one, by the way, is a tight end because it's almost certainly going to be Evan Ingram's last game on Sunday with the Giants. They're probably going to cut Kyle Rudolph, so I think that leaves Caden Smith as the only tight end under contract. And this is an offense that wants to run the ball a lot, and they aren't confident enough in their quarterback to throw it downfield. So, like, who's going to be their tight end next year? They don't have money to go out and get somebody. So,
Right. I mean, that's one, like, we haven't even talked about that as an area in need.
yeah, it's like an underrated one because like the tight end is pretty important for a bad offense.
Yeah, I mean yeah. So it's a safety blanket for it can be a real security blanket for a young quarterback, and they obviously haven't had that stability there for a few years now.
What when so we can I guess we can talk about it since we mentioned it earlier. They are gonna have to hire a new GM soon. Whether they announce, by the way, if they announce Gettleman as a retirement and they let him last until the end of the season, it's just such a slap in the face to Jerry Reese, who I get like had some mistakes at the end, but he was the GM for two Super Bowls and they fired him before the end of the season because of the Eli Manning stuff. And I don't think Dave Gettleman has done anything to show that he deserves any more respect than that. So.
I mean, why don't they just say like he's fired after the season?
Yeah,
Like it's
they could have started interviewing people if
they
they
could
wanted.
have already, which is crazy, right?
Yeah, what I mean, I get it. Like ultimately, they might. There's not going to be that many GM openings, I don't think, this year. It seems like because it seems like the Jaguars insanely might keep Balky, even though fans are like they're like protesting that. I heard, and I think the Raiders might keep Mike Mayock potentially if they do that. Then I don't really know how many GM jobs there are. The Bears probably will be one. I would think Ryan Pace doesn't come back, but so the appeal for the Giants gig is pretty much just that it might be the only gig available. But like, what appeals are there for this job? Because I know that we can come up with a lot of negatives, but can you come up with any positives?
For this GM job,
Yeah,
the draft capital.
yeah,
Um, the draft capital for sure. I mean, like if you go to Tankathon right now, great website by the way, and a great name. Tankathon, they have a draft power rankings. Obviously, the cap situation's a mess. The um, the uh, the roster's a mess. So we know that. But if you look at the draft power rankings on Tankathon, the Giants are currently, I believe, and I'll check it right now as we're talking, they're third. The Jets, Jaguars, and Giants, and that's because they got the two firsts and the two thirds, and so I think there's a lot to like on that front. Now, are you going to immediately improve your roster with an extra third round pick, an extra first? Probably not, but it helps. You
well,
certainly have
it helps with depth long term, which has been their issue forever.
exactly, and you certainly have the ammo to trade up. I mean, now hypothetically, if there was a quarterback and you wanted to get a quarterback, you have that ammo to trade up. I don't know if that'll be a situation they'll find themselves in, whether it's for a quarterback or not, but. I think probably you got to address offensive line with one of those first two picks. And for they got 5 and 8 right now. So I think you got to go either tackle or right, or it's the Linderbaum kid, the center from
Yeah,
Iowa maybe.
Iowa. Yeah.
Um, so that's that. I think so that's so like Joe Judge is sort of a negative to this job because you got to inherit him. But I think this is something we actually we're writing a bunch of stuff in advance because you can kind of write this ahead of time. Um, But like Joe Judge could also be a positive because he's on the hot seat entering this year. So there's a possibility the new GM could have his own coach by next year.
Yeah. And so, and the theory behind that is that he'd basically the GM would have a free year to where the record doesn't matter, and he gets to evaluate what's wrong with the Giants, kind of thing.
Yes, and you know what? I forgot to make that point in that story, so I'm going to go back and add that. So that's a good
There
point.
you go.
Yeah, we were texting that very thing. The GM does. That's a great point. Does have a free year, at least in the eyes of, the person who the coach or the fan base blames, right? Because Dave
Yeah.
Gettleman sort of kind of been the scapegoat this whole time. Maybe not so much totally right now, but next year for sure, Judge will totally be the scapegoat.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to fire all the offensive coaches. It'll just be Judge and Daniel Jones will be the two that have the target on their back. So, and we knew Jones would this year, and then it was a disastrous year. I mean, how many touchdown passes did he end with? I just want to pull that up.
I'm gonna guess 10.
I think you're right. Yeah, 10.
I didn't cheat.
10 passing touchdowns, and he also had 2 rushing. But over the last 2 years, over 25 games with Joe Judge, he has 21 passing touchdowns. In 13
Yikes.
games as a rookie, he had 24. Like in the modern NFL, to only have 21 passing touchdowns in 25 games is just absolutely insane. You think you would luck into some where everybody on the defense falls over and the guy runs for a touchdown. But
And what's funny is their record in those games is you'd think it would be worse. I mean, 9-16 with him as their starter over the past 2
I
years.
mean, what that tells you is that the defense is playing well.
Of course.
And the offense is not holding up their end. So we said this going into the year. If the offense was even a little bit better, they win a couple more games. Not only was they averaged 17.5 points a game last year, they're at like 16 now. The offense got worse. Like it's just wild. And I know a lot of that's the last 5 weeks, but they weren't scoring with Daniel Jones either. So
you're right. They're getting you choked up.
Yeah. It's got a little cough. Getting out of had a little flu situation recently.
Sick of the Giants. Oh,
hey. No, we enjoyed the Giants, just not. So we can end on this note. When we're talking about the season, they do have a game on Sunday. I don't think people actually care about predictions for that game, so we're not going to do that.
100-0.
When you look back at this 2021 season, what will you remember about the Giants?
Oh my gosh.
I feel like it's got to be I feel like the Judge speech because it's recency bias, but I feel like it encapsulates everything that was wrong with the team this year.
I feel like we should get that. I will remember, that song.
And like it's like a montage of all the terrible things that happened.
Green Day, Time of Your Life. Yeah. That would be incredible. One of those guys on Twitter should put that together. The Bobby Skinner guy, that fella.
Yeah.
There you go. How about Green Day, Time of Your Life, Giants 2021 montage. But yeah, I think the Judge speech really sums it up because to me, this team was a whole lot of talk and a whole lot of maybe not show per se, but like a whole lot of big names and big words. Not a whole lot of big names, but enough big names, big words, and big talk, I guess, about what's going right, and very little demonstratively to show that anything was going right. Right? I mean, they signed Kenny Golladay, and Dory Jackson had an okay year, but like they bring in these guys to help this offense, and Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, Kyle Rudolph, and they just fizzle. They never factored in from the get-go. They were supposed to be the guys, so they were a whole lot of expectations and notable names to come in to help this offense, and it could not have gone worse. And yeah, you hear a coach talk a lot about culture and all that stuff, but like, I think we talked to Marcus Spears. He played in the NFL for a while. He's with ESPN now. A couple weeks ago, for these stories we've been doing about the state of the Giants, and he said, "Winning, man, like winning. That's what builds culture. Winning games, like." And I get that there are things that go into that behind the scenes, like the attitude of players and that sort of thing, and those are important. But like, it's just really hard for fans to take seriously a coach who's talking about these things, and just the results are not showing up in any meaningful, tangible way. So I'll just remember that about this team, because like, it's easy to forget now that this team actually had some expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like, it all fizzled so fast because like, they started 0-3 and then 1-5, right?
Yeah.
So it all fizzled out really fast, and they had these injuries from the get go. But like, let's not forget that like when this team convened for camp in late July, there was significant expectations that this would be a year that they would build on 6-10, that they could potentially push for a playoff spot with the extra wild card in the 17th game. And that Daniel Jones could take the next step. And like none of those things happened, and like not even close.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you go back and look at all the storylines, I would say they got the bad end of just about every one of them. I
Oh, I
mean,
know.
even guys that we just like, took for granted as they would just be good or as great as they were last year, Leonard Williams and James Bradbury, who were fantastic last year, and probably the reason why they won 6 games in a lot of ways. And Bradbury had, a terrible year in a lot of ways. He got better at the end of the year, but he was getting beat all year. He let up like 6 touchdowns all year, let up 2 last year. Leonard, I think, has 5.5 sacks, and he finally got hurt for the first time, so he's been banged up at the end. And you didn't see like Dexter Lawrence take the leap. Sterling Shepard didn't stay healthy like he wanted to. Saquon wasn't Saquon. Like Andrew Thomas and Xavier McKinney are the two you could say made a leap forward, and I don't know if there's anybody else on the roster.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they had a bad luck thing with Blake Martinez.
Yeah,
That stunk for him very early on. The God, how long ago was that he got hurt? Falcons week 3,
yeah, it
and
was not
that's
long ago.
that's too bad. He's a good guy, and he seems like a good guy, and a good leader for this defense, and a really good player too. So they really missed him. So Azeez Ojulari had a pretty solid rookie year. He put up some good sacks, but like wasn't really rated highly by PFF if you look at
Yeah, I
like
think
the nitty
he lucked
gritty.
into a lot of those sacks, but you'll take what you can get, I guess.
Sure, I think it's better than the alternative of what they've been getting from Lorenzo Carter and O'Shane
Yeah,
Zimenez, which is like zero. But yeah, Thomas, McKinney, and it's funny. I'm like staring at my screen right now, and we were talking about this before we started. Like, who are the pieces that the new GM can and should build around? Right, Thomas, McKinney, and then like you and I were talking about it. Like, where do you stretch it? Dexter Lawrence, I guess. Ojulari, probably, and then
yeah,
probably Leonard Williams, who's not worth his
I guess
contract.
I don't know, maybe a Dory Jackson, but I don't know if he would be as good if they didn't have Bradbury on the other side either.
Right, and he can't necessarily stay healthy. And like at
No,
this point in his career, like how deep into his career is he? I mean, he's still pretty young, obviously. So duh, he's going to be 27 basically at the start of next year. So, um, but yeah, I think definitively, if you can pick 5 definitive pieces to build around, probably those 5 guys. And Carl Banks mentioned this when we talked to him for this series of stories on the Giants rebuild. He said you probably need 10 to 12 guys that are cornerstone foundational players. And let's keep in mind here, Carl Banks is employed by the Giants. Like he's their
yeah,
radio play-by-play guy. And he said they have 3 to 5 guys right now. They're far away. They're far
yeah,
away.
yep. So and they need to hit on all their draft picks because they're not signing any cornerstone guys. So Um, all right, we can wrap up on that note. You can if you want to know what our predictions are. We both predicted them to get killed. I don't think you really care about the score. We're just gonna assume they're gonna get killed until they don't, and they only have one game left. So the season will end on Sunday. It'll be a long off season. It'll be a busy one. We'll have a GM search. I'm sure we'll get another pod for you in the coming weeks about that GM search. But thanks for listening this season, guys, and we'll hit you soon.